This video is sponsored by Cygames. Hey there, Ignideus here. Dawnbreak Nightedge has been out for a little while now, and a balance patch just rolled out, so it's a good time to ask the question, what deck can I play for each class for the Dawnbreak Nightedge meta? I have one deck here for each class. Let's just jump into it. First up, we have a Forestcraft. This is a Midrange Forestcraft list, not too dissimilar from the Control Forestcraft list that I showcased on this channel recently, although it's a little bit less heavy on the top end of the curve, and a little bit more threat on the early game. The game plan of the deck is to put heavy pressure on your opponent in the early and mid game, making a huge board presence as well as dealing with their board, and then finishing off with a high damage Storm finisher at the end, such as Jungle Warden, which is an enhanced 10, summon another one, and then give them both Storm, and King Elephant, which gains +1/+1 for each card in your hand. Some of the key cards in this deck that are new to Dawnbreak Nightedge are Paula, Icy Warmth, which is a very versatile 2-drop, can just be a vanilla 2 playpoint 2/2, but if you meet the condition of playing at least 2 other cards in the same turn, it can become Paula Gentle Warmth, which has a bounce effect, or Paula Passionate Warmth, which has a 1 damage ping effect, and both of which can be quite valuable. We also have Fashionista Nelcha, which again is very versatile, using the Choose mechanic, the key mechanic of Dawnbreak Nightedge, and it can either give you an Angel's Dress to buff another follower, or a Demon's Dress to weaken an enemy follower. Usually you'd play it for the Demon's Dress, and then it combos very well with Wood of Brambles, which then can clear any enemy follower. Speaking of Wood of Brambles, it's one of the critical cards in Forestcraft, one of the strongest cards in the entire class, and the reason being that it allows your smaller followers to trade up, and Forestcraft has a very large abundance of small followers. At the same time, it's also a very good tech against Swordcraft, who has Knights, as well as Portalcraft, which has Artifacts and Puppets, a lot of which are only at 1 defense, so Wood of Brambles allows you to clear them off essentially for free. You also have Airbound Barrage to bounce your Wood of Brambles and keep the train going that way. 2 other critical cards are Cassiopeia and Crystallia Erin. Cassiopeia being able to clear wide enemy boards, and Crystallia Erin giving yourself another evolution point, 3 defense, as well as a ward. So 2 very strong defensive tools in the mid game in order to help you out to get to the late game finishers such as Jungle Warden and King Elephant, and finish your opponent off. For Swordcraft, we have Midrange Swordcraft, potentially one of the most powerful decks in the rotation format right now. It's another mid-range deck, so the game plan is similar to the Forestcraft deck we just looked at, put a lot of pressure in the early and mid-game, but instead of an individually huge Storm finisher at the end, such as King Elephant or Jungle Warden, Midrange Swordcraft just never lets the pressure go. And the way it does this is by completely managing the entire board. On your end, you flood the board over and over again with cards like Frontline Cavalier, which can summon 2 Heavy Knights, and Luminous Mage, which can summon a Luminous Knight, and then of course Arthur Night King, one of the key cards in the entire deck, which randomly puts different Swordcraft followers that cost 2 play points or less from your deck into play until your area is full. At the same time as developing your board continually, you also clear their board with your abundance of rush followers, such as Kuhulin and Lancer of the Tempest, and Gawain of the Round Table is not only a rush follower, but it also reduces the cost of your Arthurs and your Sky Fortresses. With such a dominating board presence, you're then free to establish the Sky Fortress, which is one of the key cards that was introduced in Dawnbreak Nightedge as well. Not only is it a rush follower, but it also gives an allied follower +3/+4, making your board even more intimidating than it was before, and dealing with your opponent's board as well, with a very sizable body. Other key cards to watch out for from Dawnbreak Nightedge are Chromatic Duel, very powerful card, able to give you Queen Emera the White, or Queen Magnus the Black. Queen Emera the White, of course, is a rush follower that can summon a knight. Again, it's that board presence coming into play. And Queen Magnus the Black, also very powerful, allowing you to protect your board state by having your allied followers not be able to be damaged by spells and effects until the end of your opponent's next turn. Or you could play it for 6 and just get them both for free. We also have Sky Commander Celia, which is not only a powerful finisher in the Despair's Messenger form, again, making use of the Dawnbreak Nightedge Choose mechanic, and Despair's Messenger is a Storm follower that gains +1/+0 for each other allied follower in play. Again, this synergizes with your immense board presence that you can generate as Swordcraft, Midrange Swordcraft right now. Or you can actually just use it as immense board presence in the Hope Strategist form, summoning both a Shield Guardian and a Heavy Knight, as well as putting a 2/4 body in play. And of course, Val's Magical Marksman. These Choose followers are very powerful. This one allows you to have either a Holy Pure Bomb or a Fatal Spell Bomb. Holy Pure Bomb banishes an enemy follower or amulet, allowing you to get rid of something big, while Fatal Spell Bomb is only 1 play point cost and can straight up destroy an enemy follower with 3 defense or less, so a very cheap removal. Midrange Swordcraft as an archetype has historically been a performer in Shadowverse's history, and with the rotation of a lot of board clear tools in Rise of Bahamut out of the rotation format, as well as the new tools it received in Dawnbreak Nightedge, it's now one of the top dogs to watch out for when you're playing on ladder. Another top dog to watch out for on ladder is Summit Temple Havencraft, a very powerful deck which revolves around landing Summit Temple, and then the effect of Summit Temple allows your Havencraft followers to deal damage equal to their defense, and with Summit Temple active you can play Heavenly Knight, which has Storm with an amulet in play, that amulet being Summit Temple, and then it allows you to deal 7 damage because the defense of the follower is 7 instead of the measly 3 damage that it usually has. This deck benefited a lot from the new cards that it received in Dawnbreak Nightedge. Jeweled Priestess, again another choose card, allowing you to add a white diamond or a black diamond into your deck, which can either draw you cards or restore damage and deal damage at the same time. Both effects are very powerful depending on the situation. We also have Serenian Hind, another choose card. The Serenian Light Hind form gives you a rush that combos very well with Summit Temple, because it also restores defense to itself after it trades. And we also have the Serenian Dark Hind form, which is also very powerful. Not only does it have Bane, but it can proc a lot of your countdown amulets, giving this deck a lot more board presence than it had previously, because it allows it to proc off Beastly Vow, which summons a 4/4 body, as well as Gemstone Carapace, which summons a 3/5 body, and the new card Morier Encomium, which not only draws a card, but also can proc off of Serenian Dark Hind, and in general is just a pretty solid removal tool, countdown to destroy a random enemy follower. And in a meta that's really focused mostly on board presence, Jean is one of the key cards that you must include, because it deals 3 damage to all enemy followers and restores 3 to yours. So not only does it clear the enemy boards which they're establishing, if they're playing Midrange Forestcraft or Midrange Swordcraft or Artifact Portalcraft or what have you, it also combos well with your Summit Temple because it allows you to restore the defense of your followers and get their attack back up to proc with the Summit Temple once again. Another tech card you can consider taking out is the Heavenly Aegis. I like to include one just in case you end up fighting an attrition-based matchup, but I have seen decks also not run it because in a lot of cases it can be very, very slow. But in a game that goes on long enough, an indestructible threat is of course very powerful, and it also combos well with Ether of the White Wing, being able to pull it out of your deck, so you don't even have to pay the full price for it if you reach turn 10. For Runecraft, I think the best deck to play right now is a Ginger-based deck. As the name implies, it employs the use of World Wielder Ginger, changing the cost of all followers in your hand to 0, and that allows you to play Zeus's and just create an insane board presence on turn 9. I've covered a deck similar to this on the channel before, but this one is a little more heavy on the Ginger game plan, because a lot of the times you just want that Ginger on 9, and that consistency of having 3 then, yeah, it makes it a little better. Because once you get that Ginger online and 3 Zeus's and Israfils and what have you, this deck just kind of becomes unstoppable. In terms of Dawnbreak Nightedge cards that make a splash in this deck, we have Paradise Vanguard, a new neutral card that allows you to banish an enemy follower with 1 defense, and that defensive opportunity is pretty important when you want to survive to your Ginger, as well as just a good tempo swing to establish your own board. You also have Beast-Faced Mage, which allows you to put an Earth Essence into your hand upon Clash, and that helps you proc your Master Mage Levi's. Other than that, World Wielder Ginger relies a lot on neutral synergies anyway with Zeus's and Israfils, so it's no surprise that the early and mid game of this deck also relies heavily on neutral synergies. You might as well make the most of it, right? Felice Leonardian Mage relies on neutral cards in your hand to deal damage to an enemy follower. You can also evolve it to gain Storm, and that ends up putting a lot of pressure on your opponent as well. Witcher Suite's one of the most important early game cards. This allows you to draw a card if you have more neutral cards in your hand than Runecraft cards. And one of the critical cards in this deck for this meta is actually Abomination Awakened, which is a 3-play.66, which you can manually evolve just to have a huge body that can attack, and that's strong in and of itself. But if you can get the effect off, it does an AoE damage to your opponent's board, as well as evolves by itself, allowing you to attack with it. And of course, AoE damage is very valuable right now, again, as we've mentioned, in this mid-range, board presence-centric meta, and you can help get the effect of Abomination Awakened off with cards such as Mysterian Grimoire, which draws you 2 cards, and that's helpful because it doesn't have any spells in this deck, so it doesn't actually have a downside. And Pure-Hearted Stringer as well allows you to draw 2 cards and helps you not only just cycle through your deck to try and get to your Ginger faster, but also synergize with the Abomination Awakened, which can help you survive to your Ginger. So it all works together pretty nicely. For Portalcraft, I think the best deck is still Artifact Portalcraft. While Puppet Portalcraft did get some new toys in Dawnbreak Nightedge, I still find that Artifact Portalcraft is more consistent. The game plan is the same as always. Make an incredible board using cheap artifacts that you shuffle into your deck, and then you can cycle through them even faster with Deus Ex Machina, and Magna Legacy can help you remove enemy boards, which of course, as we've mentioned, is pretty powerful in this board-centric meta, and you can finish them off as well with Saphira Synthetic Beast if you didn't finish them off with your sheer board presence already. A huge part of why this deck got so much more powerful in Dawnbreak Nightedge is because of one card that the deck got with the new expansion. That being, of course, Miriam, Synthetic Being, yet another choose card. It allows you to play it either as a L'Ange Miriam or a La Diaboltine Miriam. L'Ange Miriam putting a Radiant artifact and a Prime artifact into your deck, both powerful tools, Radiance being Storm artifacts and Prime artifacts being a new type of artifact with Dawnbreak Nightedge that when they get destroyed, they just resummon themselves at the beginning of your next turn. And we also have La Diaboltine Miriam, which puts a random artifact card from your deck into your hand. So it's a very, very cheap tutor, which allows you to get your board presence going really early and just have an unmanageable board state for your opponent to deal with. An incredibly powerful card and makes the deck as a whole much more powerful as well. Overall, I think those 5 decks or something akin to them are the best decks you could be running in the current rotation meta. But we'll take a look at the last 3 classes as well. For Bloodcraft, we have an Aggro Bats deck. This deck aims to go underneath all these mid-range decks by going just way faster than they can handle. This deck got a lot of new tools in Dawnbreak Nightedge that basically made it exist. First of all, we have the reintroduction of Summon Bloodkin into the rotation card pool. Summoning 2 Force Bats or 2 play points is instrumental in this deck because of how many bat synergies they have. Gift for Bloodkin, another Dawnbreak Nightedge card. The 0 play point card that deals damage to your opponent and summons you a Force Bat, which is important for Old Blood King, which is a 5 play point 1/4 with Ambush that gives allied Force Bats a come into play +1 attack and storm, allowing your Force Bats to become finishers. Red Talon Strike is a very strong card as well, introduced in Dawnbreak Nightedge. A lot of tools for Force Bat archetype in this expansion. It's another aggressive card, giving an allied follower +1 attack until the end of your turn and summoning a Force Bat, which of course then synergizes with Old Blood King as well. And finally, Vania, Nightshade Vampire, to finish it off at the top end of Dawnbreak Nightedge Legendary, which is a choose card, whereby when you're in Vengeance, you can either have a Drain follower that gives you a Ward Force Bat, again synergizing with Old Blood King and the rest of your deck, or a Storm follower, which can be a finisher and also summoning a Force Bat that has Bane. So if you have Old Blood King active, you can play Vania, get a Bane card, get through a massive war, and then connect to the enemy phase. In terms of key cards in the deck to deal with the current meta, we have a lot of removal such as Snarling Chains, and of course the ever important Razory Claw, which allows you to, of course, strike the opponent's face or one of their followers if you really need to. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Moon and Sun, a neutral Dawnbreak Nightedge choose card that ends up making a splash in a lot of decks because it gives you a recurring threat, and that can be really helpful for this kind of aggressive deck that ends up dumping their hand a lot of the time, because it just gives you a threat that you can just keep coming back, as long as it's not banished, of course. Because Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi both have the last words of putting a Moon and Sun into your hand. Just a persistent threat for the deck to keep it going and never have an empty turn, which is pretty important when you're trying to put as much pressure on your opponent as possible. For Dragoncraft, I have tried everything, and I still find that ramp is the most consistent performer. You aim to ramp up your play points as fast as possible so you can go finish your opponent off with large threats as fast as possible, such as Zeus and Azitahaka. Key cards from Dawnbreak Nightedge that make an appearance in this deck, of course, Dragon Cleaver. Roy is so good. Dragon Life Blade is a ramp card, which is, of course, strong. And Dragon Strife Blade is a 2 play point deal 3 damage, which is also strong. As Ramp Dragoncraft, you want to be putting large threats on the board, and the only way you're safe to do that a lot of the time is to be able to clear your opponent's board as well, so you don't just get run over before you can get anything done. Somniferous Whiteworm, also a card from Dawnbreak Nightedge, making an appearance in the deck, a 2 play point 2/1. That puts a Dragon's Nest into your hand, and Dragon's Nest got a lot better because the game got slower. So not only is this a 2-drop that you can just have right there on the board to help you contest, but it also gives you a card that helps you restore defense and draw a card, which can help you draw into your larger threats. Finally, for Dawnbreak Nightedge cards, you also have Force of the Dragon Newt, which is an AoE card, again, acting defensively to get to your larger threats, as well as dealing all-important damage to the enemy leader's face. Critical cards in this deck for this meta are Frenzied Drake. You want to have the board clear, so you run this card. Bahamut is gone from rotation, so you need something to be able to clear a lot of opponent's threats. We also have Canyon of the Dragons, which is really hard to deal with. Not a lot of people are running Amulet Destruction, so you just end up getting a big threat over and over and over again, turn after turn. Of course, all your ramp stuff like Sybils and Oracles and Ailas and the like. One card that I surprisingly found to be extremely successful is Avowed Strike. Not only is it early removal, but late game, it draws you 2 cards, which is ever so important because it avoids you running out of fuel, as well as draws you towards your big chunky win conditions, like Azitahaka and Zeus, of course. And it also removes something gigantic because it deals damage 2 times the number of other Dragoncraft cards in your hand. Pretty crazy. I've seen this getting up to like 14 damage easily, which is great for clearing stuff like enemy Zeus's or a Sky Fortress buffed follower. All in all, pleasantly surprised by Avowed Strike and how strong it is in this deck. Finally, we have Shadowcraft. I think Shadowcraft is struggling a little bit in the rotation meta right now, but I found that the best deck to play if you want to play Shadowcraft is Reanimate Shadowcraft. The point of the deck is to have Zeus in your hand, and then getting it destroyed with an early Burial Rite from either Gloomy Necromancer or Everdark Strix, and then just summoning it over and over again with Reanimate cards like Death Dragon Caller and So Death Reap Life. Recently, Shadowcraft was buffed, and that Corpse Lord of Woe and Troth's Curse were improved, and we are running 2 Corpse Lord of Woes in this deck with its fancy new +1 attack and reduced by 2 Necromancy, and it just becomes a persistent threat that the opponent has to deal with. But in terms of new cards from Dawnbreak Nightedge, this deck makes use of Ceridwen Eternity Hunter, another Choose card, and a new Shadowcraft Legendary, which can give you an Eternal Potion, which allows you to summon a Zeus as early as turn 7 with a Reanimate 10 for 5 play points, or an Instant Potion, which is a cheap removal option. We also have Moon and Sun, but in this case, Moon and Sun is being used in conjunction with another new card, Regenerate Spirit, which allows you to get a 3-drop card for 2 play points, and also has this Enhance 8 effect, and getting a Reanimate 5, which combos well with Dark Blade Fiend and Underworld Ruler Aisha, which can really help you get back on the board in terms of board presence. Critical cards for this meta in particular are the Odal. I think with a lot of decks running around trying to establish a lot of followers on board, the Odal does a lot to reduce their number as well as their fortitude, and just is a really good defensive card to have overall. And if they're flooding the board to the degree that their entire area is full, then you don't even summon the Odette for them, and you can have the Odal trade into something else, and it's a 6/5 follower, essentially with Rush, because it evolves itself when it's summoned, so it ends up being quite powerful removal. We also have Series of the Night, which is very good to trade into enemy followers. Of course, it has that clash effect of dealing 2 to them before it even takes any damage in the first place. And of course, the Restoration effect, playing defensively so you can get to your Reanimate trains near to the end. And there you have it, a meta deck for each class, as well as the card choices from the new expansion and the critical card choices for the meta in particular. These are skeletons for the decks that I think are the best performers for each class. Of course, you can take out cards and change them up as you see fit. These decks are just what I would run personally. That's it for this video. Like it if you did, don't if you didn't. Subscribe for more Shadowverse content in the very near future. And of course, thank you to my wonderful patrons, patreon.com/Ignideus if you'd like to support the channel as well. I'd highly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.